This is the new Range Rover Sport autobiography, and it's got it all. It looks good, it's powerful, it has modern technology, great off-road capability, completely redesigned from the old model with a new exterior and interior, and it's expensive. This one has a sticker price of over $100,000. Today, I'm going to review the new Range Rover Sport autobiography and show you all of its quirks and features. Today's video is brought to you by Cars and Bids, my online enthusiast car auction site that recently sold this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Check it out at carsandbids.com. All right, time for a thorough review of the Range Rover Sport, starting with an overview. So, the new Rover Sport, the third generation model, was redesigned for the 23 model year. I still haven't done a full review of the new Sport. I did a walk around when it was first announced about 2 years ago, but I wanted to do a full review, get behind the wheel, and check out its quirks and features. So, let's start with pricing. This is, well, expensive. A Range Rover Sport starts around $86,000, which makes it one of the most expensive vehicles in its segment. The closest competitor is probably the Porsche Cayenne, which starts in the low to mid $80,000 range. But of course, the Cayenne focuses more on sport and performance and luxury, while the Range Rover Sport is more off-road capability with some performance and luxury. By comparison, a BMW X5, which is a competitor to this, starts in the mid $60,000 range, so this and the Cayenne are a lot more expensive. So let's talk quirks and features, starting outside with the design, which has been greatly modernized and sharpened compared to the outgoing Range Rover Sport. You take a look at the old Sport, you can see it has a fairly similar profile and overall shape to the new model, but the new version has just been sculpted, massaged, changed, just enough to look both different and newer and more modern. And Land Rover has really put a focus on minimalism with the exterior design in this car. There's no extraneous lines or scoops or things you might have found 10 years ago in the design. It's all very simple and restrained. A few interesting examples. One, you can see the windows come directly to the body on the doors on the side of the car, which is really cool. There's not even a rubber gasket there. It's just window to door. They're trying to make it as simple as possible. Same deal with the door handles, which, when the car is locked, they're flush with the body for a simpler, more aerodynamic shape. And I especially love around back, where the Range Rover Sport has been changed the most in its new version. You can see a new rear-end design, but it almost doesn't look like it has bumpers at all back here. It's very nice, massaged, modernist look all around this car. With that said, one obnoxious drawback: when you unlock the doors and open them, this projection comes from the mirrors. It's supposed to be an image of the new Range Rover Sport. Land Rover does that on all of its cars. Personally, I think it's a bit much. A lot of brands do this. It's always a bit much. It's a little over the top. But aside from that, you really do have to give them credit for the minimalist luxury look in this car, and you can even see more of it in back. The rear wiper is not anywhere to be found mounted on the rear window. This is a signature Land Rover hallmark. It's mounted below the rear spoiler, and so you don't actually see it when you look in the back of the car. It's hidden, which looks great. And also in back, just like on the sides, the window comes right down to the body. There's no rubber gasket in between like on most other cars, and it looks very modern, very fresh, almost concept car-like in its minimalist luxury simplicity. But anyway, next we climb into the new Range Rover Sport, and you're greeted on the doorsill by autobiography. Illuminated, looks nice. That's the trim level of this Range Rover Sport, one of Land Rover's top luxury trims. You move past the doorsill and you quickly discover that the interior also has a significant minimalist focus, and there are some really clear examples of that. Probably the best is in the center control stack. Take a look at the climate controls, where you have these two dials that incorporate several different functions in one. In their normal state, you twist them to change the climate control temperature, but if you pull the dial, it will change the fan speed of the climate control system. If you push the dial, it will turn on the heated seats, switch it to the right, or the cool cooled seat, switch it to the left. This allows Land Rover to integrate 3 different functions into one single dial, so they don't have to have several buttons for all these features. The goal is to reduce interior clutter. Here's another good example of integrating controls to cut down on clutter. The power seat controls. They're on the doors. You can see there's a seat back and a seat bottom like most cars, and inside the power seat controls are your memory buttons, which you can tap in order to put the seat, the steering wheel where you want it. That's a very cool idea. The seats, the memory, they're already basically the same type of thing, so why not integrate them into one control and cut down on all this stuff? And there are several other interesting controls in here beyond the minimalist stuff. Some rather quirky ones. One is the gear selector, which isn't that unusual, but still worth noting. It's this stubby little thing. You put your hand on top, press a button, and then push forward for reverse. You pull down for drive, and then park is a little button next to the gear selector. Now, right near there, you have the drive mode dial. You can see here, you twist it to go into, well, your various drive modes. No real surprise there. The interesting part is if you push it down, it goes into an automatic drive mode, and then the car senses what you're trying to do, sport mode, off-road, terrain, whatever, and it will do it for you, or push it up and you can manually select. And next up, another interesting quirk in here, the rear view mirror, which you can see is a rear view mirror. You flip this switch and it becomes a camera showing what's behind you, which is a great feature. With a mirror, you gotta look through the whole back of the car. With a camera, you don't. You just see what's directly behind you. And how about this for a neat trick? The steering wheel buttons can change what they show and what they do. Take a look at this. Over on the left, this pad will change what it's displaying and how it functions depending on what screen you're on in the gauge cluster. Depending on what you're adjusting, this pad changes. It's kind of a neat party trick that it can do multiple things depending on what's lit up in that moment. Pretty cool. And how about this? There is a hidden storage compartment and a rather large one. You got the center console here. You open up the center console lid, you got storage. In front of that, you open up this lid and you have cup holders, pretty standard. But you can push the cup holders back and you have an extra storage compartment below the cup holders that probably most people would never find out about. You can keep your hidden items down there. And speaking of hidden items, how about this? Directly below the center screen, you have your wireless phone charger. It's right here. You would not expect it to be there. You don't even really see it from the driver or passenger seats, but it's there. A nice little place you can slide in your phone instead of something that dominates the center control stack, like in some cars. And how about this? You got 2 glove boxes. You can open them with the buttons here. One up arrow, one down. Up arrow obviously opens the upper glove box, as you can see, and the down arrow opens the lower glove box. That adds some extra storage and practicality in this interior. In the lower glove box, you'll note that we have the window sticker, which has a $110,000 sticker price, as you can see, but also an interesting item. This interior is leather-free. Land Rover offers this as an option. It's $1,400 for the interior and an extra $300 for a leather-free steering wheel. So around $2,000 to go fully leather-free. For people who don't want cow hides, animal products in their interiors, you can do it in this car. And next up, we move on to the infotainment system, this large screen in the center of the interior, which has its pros and cons, although mostly pros. I generally like this infotainment system. I think it's got a lot of good stuff, but a few drawbacks. The benefits, number one, the home screen. I like that it's a 3-panel display that shows what you want to see, and you can scroll over to see even more, and it's configurable, so you can have whatever 3 panels you want displayed at the same time. That's nice to see, and it works well. I also love the ease of getting to the camera system in this car. You don't have to go into reverse and then switch your camera, choose the one you want. Instead, just tap this icon on the screen and then poof, your cameras are up. This is really beneficial if you're in a tight space but you're not backing up. You're trying to park somewhere. In all cars, the cameras come on in reverse, but if you want to see them, you can easily access it in this car. Not true of others. I also like the fact that the climate controls are not integrated into this infotainment screen. That would have been an easy decision for Land Rover to do, given the minimalist focus of this interior and given that some rivals have done this, like Mercedes-Benz. Instead, the climate controls are separate, so you don't have to go into screen menus and icons in order to change simple things like your interior temperature. And another thing I love about this infotainment system system is the wade sensing feature. You can access it here. It shows you the exact depth of the water that you're currently driving in. There are sensors in the car that'll show you that, and it gives you an idea of, okay, it's too deep, don't go any further, because it has this line on the side of the car that gives you a max fording depth. That is a very cool feature that is a neat idea of tech in the off-roader world. With that said, there are some drawbacks in this infotainment system, mainly related to controlling stuff. For instance, I want to change the satellite radio station, so I pressed next to go to the next one. Well, it doesn't actually take you to the next one, it takes you to this long list of satellite radio stations then you can choose. So going to the next station is like a two-step process, and there's a few other over-complications in this system that are a little bit annoying. I also don't love the fact that there's no dual screen display. You can't have your navigation and your music on at once, for instance, which is disappointing, especially considering the size of this screen. But Land Rover makes up for any drawbacks in the infotainment screen in the gauge cluster screen, which is great. The gauge screen is obviously a full screen, as you can see, and very configurable. You can adjust information panels to display precisely what you want to see. So if you're also disappointed you don't have a dual setup in the middle with the map and the radio, well, you could put the radio in the gauge screen and have the map in the center. Otherwise, very configurable in the gauge cluster. You can have a full screen map in here and a lot of other configurability to tailor to exactly what you want. And next up, we move into the back seat in the Range Rover Sport. And I gotta say, the first thing that strikes me back here, I'm surprised just how roomy it is. I was just in the back of the new Lexus GX, which is less expensive than this, but a sort of similar rival in the sense that it's a luxury off-roader about the same size. The back seat in that was tiny. This has a lot of room back here. Even though it's not the large, full-size Range Rover, there's knee room, headroom, hip room. It's a nice place to be, a nice luxurious-sized back seat in the new Rover Sport. And there are some nice luxuries back here too. This one has rear seat climate control that operates the same way as the front, meaning you can adjust the fan speed by twisting the dial or the temperature, and you can even push it in and turn on heated or cooled rear seats, which is a nice luxury touch you don't often see. Also, on the subject of the climate control, you get nice climate vents here in the center, which is nice, and additional vents above your head, blowing air directly onto your upper body. You don't often see that level of climate vent piping and placement and adds cost, but I guess that's part of what you get when you pay more for a Range Rover Sport compared to its rival. Some other nice things back here, the power port, down at the bottom of the back of the front center console, you have two USB-C and a cigarette lighter style port. You can also drop down the center armrest, the center seat, and you have two panels you can pop open. You have cup holders in front, as you can see, and storage in back. This whole piece just looks nice and it operates well. And on that subject, the rear seat backs are power operated. You have a seat control on the door, as you see here. You push it just like you would up front, and the seat backs go forward and backward to add to your comfort level. You even have lighted seat belt buckles back here, which is nice. You get in, it's late at night, you can't find the buckles. Well, these are lighted to make it easier. A lot of nice luxury touches back here, and a good amount of room makes this a nice place to spend time, even though it's not the full-size, full Range Rover, just the Sport. And next up, we move on to the cargo area, which is, interestingly enough, just a cargo area. I mention that as notable because there is no third row seat offered in the new Range Rover Sport. And that's important because some rivals do offer a third row, like the Audi Q7 and the new Lexus GX. And in fact, the Rover Sport used to offer third row seating in the previous generation, but it no longer does. If you want a third row in a Range Rover, you have to step up to the full-size, full-bodied Range Rover. It's no longer offered in the Sport. Or you can get some other Land Rover models like the Discovery Sport, and the Defender. They all offer it, just not this car. But the cargo area in the Rover Sport is, as you can see, nice and big, nice and wide, and it has a few clever tricks. Like, for instance, you can lift up this panel, and then you have a cargo divider that will separate your cargo front and rear so it won't collide and mix with itself. You also have on this panel that rises up some straps that are tense so that you can put, say, for example, wine bottles on here while you're driving along, or water bottles, and keep them from spilling while you're driving, which is a nice touch, a cool idea actually. And in that same vein, you also have a tense cloth strap over on the driver's side in the cargo area where you can stick more stuff, and some netting over on the passenger side where, again, you can put more stuff if you don't want it rolling around. And under the floor, you have a massive full-size spare tire. That's an option in this car. They don't all come with it, but this one does. It ships with 5 full-size wheels and tires, and it takes up the entire floor of the cargo area. It really is huge. A couple other neat tricks back here. You have power-operated rear seats. You press these buttons like window switches, and you can raise or fold the rear seats to add more cargo space if you need it, or to put them back up if you'd prefer to do it. You just do it with a button here, no latches or pulling on stuff, no manual labor at all. And on that subject, another control you have back here, this button will lower the rear end of the car. Because the Range Rover Sport has air suspension, it can actually lower in back in case you're bringing something heavy into the cargo area and you want it lower so you don't have to lift it as high. You can do that with the push of a button. It will lower and make your load floor a little bit easier to lift items into. A nice and interesting quirk. And finally, we gotta cover powertrains. For the 2024 model year, the Range Rover Sport is only offered with 2 powertrains. The entry-level engine is a 3-liter 6-cylinder mild hybrid, not a plug-in, just a traditional gas-powered engine you put in gasoline, but there is a mild hybrid component to enhance fuel economy, and it's offered in 2 different horsepower levels. The base one has 350 horsepower, or you can upgrade to a 400 horsepower version. Or you can upgrade to the autobiography model. That's this, but for 24, the autobiography now has a plug-in hybrid twin-turbo V8 that makes over 540 horsepower, which should make it particularly thrilling to drive. This is a 23 autobiography model that has instead a plug-in hybrid 6-cylinder that makes about 440 horsepower. Still a respectable figure, but it's gone for 24 in favor of the more powerful twin-turbo V8 that I'm sure makes this car even more of a blast to drive. Now, despite the sticker price of this autobiography at around $110,000, in 23 there was a first edition Range Rover Sport that was the most expensive model. That's gone for 24, so now the autobiography is the most expensive, and now it starts around $120,000. So the 24 autobiography is more expensive, but it does have more power thanks to its new engine. And of course, 4-wheel drive standard on all Range Rover Sport models, like you would expect for a Land Rover, a brand that's known for off-road capability. All right, driving the new Range Rover Sport. Now, like I already mentioned, the powertrain in this particular one has already been discontinued, so I'm not going to spend much time talking about it. Frankly, I think it's kind of a good thing that it's no longer offered. It's not that great of an engine, especially in a top trim model. I bet that new twin-turbo V8 is awesome. But let's talk about the rest of the driving experience. And I have to say, you start driving this car around and you start to understand how Land Rover justifies such a higher price over the X5, the Q7, the Mercedes GLE. And that is, it really does a lot of stuff well, which is to say, it is comfortable, which is true of all those SUVs also. It's nice and comfortable, and you know, the ride quality is great. There's not a lot of wind noise coming from the outside. Like it feels nice in here, but also it is sporty. It is surprising how nice this car handles considering how big and how heavy it is. And that handling isn't really Land Rover's like main thing. You know, you expect an X5 to steer and handle well. A Range Rover Sport, you know, it's an off-roader, it's a big car, it's a family car. You're not thinking it's gonna steer all that well. Well, this one does. It neutralizes the size surprisingly well, and the road manners are pretty excellent, actually. It's quick to change directions, and it's sportier than I was expecting. Then you add in the off-road capability, which is, you know, kind of head and shoulders above rivals. You know, BMW, Mercedes, they don't even pursue that anymore. That's not even like one of their stated goals like it was back when those SUVs first came out in the late 90s. Now, they know, and everybody knows, that people are only gonna ever use these things on the road. Being able to drive this, you know, off-road, not that people are actually going to do that in large numbers, but the fact that it can, and that it still has the other traits, is pretty impressive. Of course, then you have the styling, which in my opinion is beautiful. The interior, which aside from the tech, which is only so-so, has some nice bright spots. Like, this car does everything well. That's impressive. It's impressive to be able to do everything well. adding in the off-roading, adding in the quietness and the smoothness, adding in the steering and sporty feel. It really is a very impressive SUV overall. In fact, I would say my only real gripe is with this infotainment system. It's fine, but it's not great. Certainly could be more responsive. Some of the controls and buttons sort of same deal. But generally speaking, this is just a fantastic vehicle. And it's no surprise since it's brand new last year. You know, it's only been out for 18 months or so. It's one of the newest in the segment, so you'd hope it would be one of the best. But it is. It really does deliver on that, and it's fantastic. Now, if you do happen to be considering a leftover or a used one with this plug-in hybrid 6-cylinder, it's not really all that great. You do get some fully electric driving range, which is nice, but the performance level is really not all that good for an autobiography. It's kind of disappointing. I think that when this car first came out, Land Rover wanted to push its top-trim, top-tier customers into a first edition model, which was a lot more expensive and had that V8. And so the autobiography kind of had to take a step back for that first model year. Now autobiography is back with that big V8, which makes more sense, but this was kind of a decontented, sort of disappointing 2023 autobiography model, and so maybe not the one to get if you're getting one. But since this engine isn't offered anymore, if you are looking at one of these new, you can't even make this mistake, so the rest of them are pretty good. And then the base 6-cylinder engine in this car I had in my old Land Rover Defender, and it was a good powertrain. And then the V8 I'm sure will have a lot of muscle. Of course, I also love the driving position here. You sit high up, you see over everything, which is cool. That's another reason that people like these vehicles, SUVs in general, but Land Rover specifically. This and the Porsche Cayenne are priced high in this segment, but they kind of rule the segment. The Cayenne has this amazing sporty driving feel, and of course the Porsche brand name, and it's fantastic. And this has also a sporty driving feel, plus the off-road capability, plus the Range Rover brand name, and it too is fantastic. Even